cloud. Admit. Hello, hello, everybody. Happy New Year. Let's see who we got in here. Okay. Let's see. The small group. So we'll give you the power. Okay, so making a couple of tweaks here to the setup. You can you've got the power to unmute yourself. If you want to unmute yourself, please do. Happy New Year. Welcome back. I hope you had a wonderful bit of time off. If you took some time off, I hope that your clothes fit better than mine. There was a lot of food that went down over the past few weeks, so feeling a little snug, for lack of a better term. You all, I hope, got the email for the C.A.R forms update. We are not going to go through every single form that was updated on that email. I would recommend that you kind of go through all of those forms independently at some point just to see what's in there. But we're only going to go through the ones that I think are either critically important or really, really interesting in the case of one form, to kind of make sure that we're up to speed on and moving forward. I will say this, we've been talking for a few months now, towards the end of last year, about looking forward to a much better year and all of the reasons that I thought that might occur, and how I was kind of bullish moving into this coming year. And many of you that are on this call right now, and for those of you that don't know, Alan's here. He's just not on camera. He's sitting in the office. So everybody say hi to Alan. He can see you on the TV. Yeah, he can see you on the TV. If you do jump on, Alan, mute your microphone and turn your volume down. You're busy. There's activity. We're talking. I'm making phone calls or getting phone calls from you about writing offers. Turn your volume down. Got it? Yep. Writing offers, talking about listing agreements. So there's activity. It's not screaming busy yet, but there is more activity in the past 2 weeks than there had been for, I would say, the entire month of November. That's a good thing. I also saw some kind of publication or news release or something, I don't remember what it was, talking about rate. And it agreed with kind of what we forecasted a few weeks ago, which was, hey, look, in 2025, it's going to be somewhere in the mid sixes. It's going to be 6.5. It's going to be 6.6, 6.4, something like that. That's about the best that we can hope for. But recent polling shows that the consumer, generally speaking, has begun to realize that this is the new normal. This is still good money. This is no longer a time to wait for a rate that we're never going to see again. It's okay to make a move. And that piece of the equation is probably, in my mind, the single biggest piece to turning this thing around. And I'll tell you why, and then we'll move on. You need to remember that probably 50% of our sales, of the sales that make up our livelihood for the past 20 years, have been what I call the move-up buyer, right? The move-up buyer is somebody that already owns a house, and for whatever reason, they want a different house. They want to sell the house they're in, and for whatever reason, they need a different house. They need a bigger house. They want to live in a different neighborhood. Who knows why they move, but they move. That's 50% of our business for the last 20 years. Everybody in this room, okay? 50% of our business. That segment of our business was gone, okay? It was non-existent for all of 2024 and for at least the back half of 2023. It was gone because all of those people during the pandemic refinanced and are parked at 2.99, 3.12, whatever percent, and they weren't willing to trade the money. Okay. They weren't willing to trade the money. If we can get them to understand that 6.5 isn't that bad, okay, and you should go ahead and do what you want to do to improve your life or to change your life, regardless of the fact that you're not going to be able to get another 3% mortgage. If we can get that shift to happen, a whole lot changes for all of us, okay, and it changes pretty darn quick. So that was probably the most encouraging piece of information that I've read or saw. I can't remember if I read it or saw it over the past few weeks. So that's really, really big news. All right. Anybody have anything to add to that before we jump into the wonderful world of car forms? Anybody seen anything that they want to talk about, or any kind of good news, bad news that they want to bring to the table for us to just massage to death? No, we're all quiet. We're just not right back into it yet, are we? I'm like 75%, just so you know, 75, but I'm doing good. All right. All right. Let me do a screen share and we'll get into it. I want this one up. Okay. All right. I'm going to have to move some boxes around, folks. Hang on a second. Okay. I'm going to put that one there. And I'm going to put this one over here, and hopefully I can read them. All right. So these are the forms that I kind of want to go over with you. It's going to be pretty quick, not a big deal. If you have questions, then, let's definitely talk about it. But the first one, this is on both buyer and seller counteroffers. They've added a little thing at the bottom that I really, really like. Okay, if we scroll all the way down to the bottom of the form, where is it? It's somewhere around here, but basically it says, I can't see it that well. Basically it says, oh, it's right here in the big capital letters, that when we execute this form or when we counter this form, okay, it doesn't matter if the previous offer was expired or if the previous counter was expired. So you remember, those of you that have been doing this for a while, you remember when you'd submit an offer, right? And the offer had a 3-day expiration on it, just the regular 3-day expiration, and maybe the seller was out of town or whatever, and they didn't counter you until day 4, right? And then at some point in one of those counters, somebody had to put in a term that said response time is extended to such and such a date, because the other offer, the original last piece of paperwork, had actually expired. So you had to put in that extension clause. You don't have to do that anymore, right? So if you submit an offer and the seller waits 4 days to counter you, and the seller sends you a counter on day 4, and the offer expired on day 3, as long as everybody's playing with the same piece of paper, everything, it just goes on. Everything starts over, right? You don't have to put in that extension clause anymore. Okay? You don't have to put in that extension clause anymore. Let me give you the one kind of weird scenario that might come up, though. Let's say that you've got a buyer and the buyer wants to offer, a lower price or some stiff terms, whatever. And they say, hey, look, I only want to put a 1-day response time on it. And if they don't answer me in that 1 day, then my offer might be different, right? We've all had those. It's dumb, but we've all had it. If that happened and the seller countered you on day 3, okay, it's alive again, right? So if your client signs it or if your client counters it or whatever, it's original terms, it's alive again. Nothing ever expired. Make sense? Okay. Let me see. Back. If you have questions on any of this stuff, just let me know when we go along, all right? So that verbiage is on both the buyer counteroffer and the seller counteroffer. It's also on the bottom of multiple counteroffers, the SMCO, right? So just keep in mind that there's no more having to put in that extension. BRBC changes again. The only thing that's really different, I think, from the last time that we talked about this is this more like clarification on what happens around compensation. Clarifying this, or excuse me, clarifying language regarding the broker contingency if the buyer does not have sufficient funds to pay the buyer broker compensation and seller will not pay. Added the ability to shorten the cancellation time frame on exclusive agreements to less than 30 days. If you follow my suggestion on a BRBC and you include the addendum that I've given you to cut and paste on, the last half of that statement doesn't matter, because remember, we want to approach it from more of a, or I want to approach it from more of a service level. And I give my client, any client that signs a BRBC with me, I give them the option to cancel anytime after 48 hours. No blood, right? No blood. If you don't like that and you want to make it more difficult for them to cancel on you, the default is if you sign it, it's 30 days minimum before you can cancel on me, okay? If you don't like the way that I do it, then make sure to take that bit of language out of the addendum that I've given you to cut and paste. Because if you cut and paste my addendum verbatim, you lose that protection as an agent, and you lose that protection of being locked into the BRBC for a minimum of 30 days. Does everybody understand that? Okay, that's your call, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to make them feel like they're locked in and they can't cancel. I feel like if they sign it and we do our job, they're not going to want to cancel. You know, I don't need to worry about them being locked into and not being able to cancel on me for 30 days. I don't need to worry about that. They're not going to cancel. They're going to like what I do. They're going to like how I do it, and it's not going to come up. The commission language part is right here, right? So the obligation to represent the client is contingent upon the seller's agreement to pay the amount of compensation, right? That goes along, kind of goes along with our addendum as well, doesn't it? So I don't know if it's the very next form because I can't see all the forms in the queue. But what that is that's an out for you. Okay, that's an out for you. If you get to the point where you've said, hey, I want you to sign my agreement. I'm going to make sure that the seller compensates me. You're not going to have to pay me. We're going to work it out. I'm going to lower my commission if I need to accept what the seller offers. Everything's going to be fine. You're not going to be out of pocket. If that doesn't come together and the buyer doesn't have the money to pay your commission, okay, you can withdraw from that agency without being in violation of any of your ethics requirements. Okay, and there's a form for it too, but know that that's a little bit different language. It gives us a definitive out if we can't get paid, so that we don't end up in a situation where we look like, well, you know, Damian said that he was going to get it from the seller, and you know, we really counted on him, and then when it actually came down to it and it got to the point where things were serious and we were about to go into contract, he found out he couldn't get paid, and you know, he took off on us and he left us high and dry, right? We don't want that. So this, along with another form that we're going to go over, kind of gives us the room to say, hey, look, you need to understand that I'm going to do my very, very best to get paid from the seller. If I can't get paid from the seller, we're going to talk about it. At that point in time, you may have to find a way to pay me. And if I can't get paid, I'm not going to be able to work the transaction. I'm not going to be able to do it, right? Again, in our market, in our situation, I think it's rare. I don't think it's going to come up that often. So far, even though they may, in some situations, want to reduce the amount that we've been asking for, okay, sellers have been paying. We've been able to get paid. We haven't found a situation yet, and I haven't talked to anybody that I know that has repped a buyer yet where they had to say, well, I couldn't get paid from the seller. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, it's time to dig into your pocket. It just hasn't happened yet. And I hope that that continues. This one's really interesting, guys. Really interesting. So, oops, sorry. Tried to close a box and I couldn't do it. Sorry, I got to move boxes so I can close things. Okay. This one is essentially a reassignment of agency or a removal of agency after there's a signed contract. Okay. After there's a signed contract. So it might go a little something like this. When Steve writes an offer for a client, the first part of that purchase agreement is an AD, an assignment of agency that basically reinforces the agency that was established in the BRBC that says Steve is this client's agent. When he writes the contract and submits it and the seller hasn't signed it, okay, let's say it goes back and forth in counter and all they're countering is Steve's, and I don't know if I'm using the right word, but I'm just going to say it and I'm not going to get sued. Maybe they're countering Steve's commission. Okay. And they go back and forth and counter and back and forth and counter. And then they suddenly realize that Steve's not going to get paid by the seller. He's not going to pay him. Okay. And the buyer doesn't have the money. And Steve needs out. Okay. That's not, if Steve needs out, that's not going to take place in a series of counters. All right. That's going to take place here with this form. Okay. So if you ever have that situation, and I hope you don't, okay, but within the negotiation of an offer that you wrote, it has come to light that you're going to need to leave. This is your form. It gives you a couple of options. Okay. And I'm not going to go through the whole form, but I'll let you read through it and understand the options. The first one is, hey, look, top section says, I'm Steve. I'm assigned as the agent to this client. I'm withdrawing my agency from the transaction and from the client. The second half of the form says, okay, what happens now? Okay. Does the client get reassigned to a different agent? Maybe the client's going to get assigned to the listing agent, and the listing agent's going to do it for free. Maybe Steve says, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it for 1%, but Michael will do it for 1%. So I'm going to reassign it to Michael, right? Don't take that the wrong way, Michael. I don't mean anything by it. I'm going to reassign it to Michael. You could reassign it to another agent that way. Okay. All of that happens down here in this portion of the form. I don't think it's going to happen to us. I hope it doesn't happen to us, but I think it's really, really interesting that C.A.R put out a whole form for it, right? It means it's happening somewhere. It means it's happening somewhere. It means that buyer's agents are getting their buyers into a negotiating position on a written contract. They can't make the commission dollars work for the buyer's brokerage, right? Because there's no way in heck a listing broker would ever need this form, right? They can't meet on the money, and the agent has to go, and they had to find a legal way to do that. And this is what that is. Okay. So again, I don't think you're going to ever need it. But if that starts to come up, this is the form that you're looking for. And if that ever starts to come up, you need to call me and we need to talk about it. And we need to talk about the form and we need to talk about what's going on and see if there's just another way to make it work. I mean, does anybody really ever want to do that to a client? I know I don't. Like, that's just not going to go well long term, right? It's just not. Questions? Anybody? Moving on. Okay. We can always ask more later. There's an ECC form, an ECCB for a buyer, and an ECCS for a seller. Just so you know, this is not going to be a required form for you and your transactions in SkySlope. All right. We're not going to require this form, but it could come in handy. I like the form. So basically, what it allows you to do, this is the buyer form. It allows you to break down different scenarios and the impact to a buyer on some different kind of proposed commission distributions. Who pays what? Seller paying all of it, seller paying part of it, seller paying none of it, right? And you can do it on a couple of different purchase prices. You can do it, you can fill out this column for purchase price number one. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, this is what it looks like if we get the house for $575,000. Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, this is what it looks like if we get the house for $600,000. And you can kind of put numbers in there and put it in front of them so that they can understand exactly what the impact will be if the seller pays, let's just use round numbers, seller pays 2%, seller only pays 1%, but you need 2%, seller pays no percent, but you need 2%, how that impacts their bottom line, right? They don't have to worry about trying to mess up the math. You can put this in front of them and show them what that looks like and how that's going to affect them. It's not binding, right? It's not binding. But there is a spot for them to sign it. So I think that if I have a situation where a buyer's going to have to dip into their pocket and pay, let's say, 1% of the purchase price to satisfy my commission want, I'm going to execute this and I'm going to have it in the file, right? So that they can't come back later and say, hey, wait a minute. You didn't tell me, or I didn't know, or I was misled somehow. And then I got to the closing table at escrow and I got my final closing statement. And all of a sudden I was $5,750 poor and it's your fault. Make sense? If I have this executed and I have this in the file, it's really easy for me to say, hey, look, I'm sorry you're upset, but you know, we went over this and here it is. We knew this was going to happen. Okay. This is a new form. Same thing on the seller side of the coin. Same concept, but a little bit different. It's, you know, obviously it's structured for a seller, not for a buyer, but it basically tells them the same stuff. Based on these purchase prices, this is what happens if you pay the full amount to the buyer's broker. This is what happens if you pay a reduced percentage to the buyer's broker. This is what happens if you just say no. Okay. Here's what the numbers look like when you do that. Okay. Again, at this point, this one's not going to be required either, but I could tell you definitively right now, I will execute it with all my sellers. When they sign the contract with the disclosure package, there's going to be this that shows, okay, Mr. Seller, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you're paying the 2.5% or the 2% to the buyer's broker. Here's the sales price. Here's what that looks like. Here's what your net looks like before all other closing costs, right? You're going to sign it. It's going to go on my file. Nobody's going to be mad later. But we have not added either of these breakdowns, either of these estimated cost sheets to the required transaction things in SkySlope. But I would use them. I would use them with the seller every single time, regardless of the situation. I would use it for the buyer anytime the seller is not going to satisfy the commission completely. Okay. Still no questions. Still moving along. All right. You guys are going to get me out of here early. Notre Dame is playing football.
Basically, it's just going over net sheets like you would have done in the past.
Yeah, Steve, it's a lot like going over a net sheet in a multiple offer situation, or if a seller said like, you know, I've got an offer and I just don't know before I sign it, I want a net sheet. The only difference is that, with these guys, these sheets here, I would get my net sheets or my estimated nets from title, right? Because title would throw in all the closing costs and everything else and give them a real close net. These sheets that we have in car forms are not going to do that. They're just going to give him or her a estimated net before all other closing costs. So you could use them. You could use them together. You could have an estimated net sheet from title with no commissions, and then you could take the net there that you got from the ECC form and then subtract, the net from title and be very, very close. Hi, Cindy. Increased deposit. When we go over the RPA, you'll probably see that they took that out of the RPA except for one little checkbox. So now if you got a situation where you're writing an offer and you want to do an EMD deposit and an initial deposit, and then you want to do an increased deposit after some benchmark like full contingency removal or inspection contingency removal or whatever, you would submit this form with your RPA detailing what that deposit looks like and when it will be submitted. Okay. And then it's got our kind of like the form. I don't remember the name of it, but you remember the form that we used to submit with the increased deposit that said, hey, this increased deposit becomes a part of LDs if LDs were elected on the contract. It includes that language at the time of execution, right? So item number 3 right here, I can't highlight. It won't let me highlight. Sorry, guys. Item number 3 right there says, hey, the increased deposit becomes a part of LDs if LDs were accepted on the purchase contract. And by the way, if you initial everything on the purchase contract, you're saying yes to LDs, liquidated damages, right? Everybody knows what those are and how they're limited? Okay. So just in case you've forgotten, that means that if a liquidated damage means that if the buyer breaches by default to the agreement, the seller can retain that deposit up to 3%. 3% max, right? So if you've got a 3% EMD and then you do a 2% increased deposit after contingency removal for a total of 5%, that's a really strong offer. But if something happens, seller only gets 3, 2 comes back. Okay. It's capped at 3. Since we're talking about it, let's jump past the RLA and talk about the RPA and the death of the SPBB form. Our relationship was short and sweet. So our RPA now, all the same stuff that we've talked about until we get down into here, right? See the increased deposit section right here? It says now you have to see the attached form. If you check that box and say we're going to do an increased deposit, I'm hoping that form will auto-populate into the transaction and you'll be able to fill it out and address that increased deposit and the disposition of that increased deposit. Where's my fun boxes? Here they are. Let's talk about all of these boxes just as a refresher, even though I know you already know. Okay. This first one, 5E, seller credit to buyer. Okay. If you check that, and you put in a dollar amount, okay, that is a seller credit to buyer for closing costs that has nothing to do with your commission. Nothing to do with your commission. All right. That's the good old seller to credit 3% to buyers recurring and non-recurring closing costs, so that the buyer can use it for their down payment, or so the buyer doesn't have to reach into their pocket for closing cost of title. Okay. That's a standard, regular old closing cost credit. They added this line to additional seller credit terms, and they put it does not include broker compensation. They put it in there in black and white. All right. If you need to specify more on that, if you need to talk more about closing cost credit, you can do it there. G3, 18A2, 18A3, that's your money. Okay. That's your commission money. All right. That box gets checked. The percentage gets entered there. Okay. And that is the commission to the buyer's broker. Somebody asked me the other day, what happens if they want to counter it? Okay. Because we kind of got used to seeing a counter to the SPBB form. Now they can just counter the RPA, and they can counter your commission amount right there if they choose to do so, which they most likely will. Right. As a refresher, remember, execute your BRBCs at 3% or above. Okay. Ask for what you're going to ask for on the RPA, knowing that you're probably going to get a counter, and it's probably going to go down to 2, 2.5, right? Don't start at 2.5 and they get countered down. Start at 3, start at 3.5, start at whatever you're execute at the BRBC, and try and maintain as much of that as you can. Okay. There is a buyer compensation affirmation that everybody's signing off on, which essentially says, look, I've got a BRBC. I'm not going to show it to you. I promise you that I've got it. I promise you that the amount that I'm asking for doesn't exceed the amount that I've specified on the BRBC, and that we're all compliant. So you don't need to see that document. We don't need to argue about it. You just need to pay me, or you just need to counter me. Okay. There's one other box that I know you already know, but I want to remind you about. Where is it? Oh, it's not on this form. I'm confused. Any questions on that? Are we all good there? So no more SPBB form. Okay, it's gone. All gone. Just fill out that section there. Don't get them confused about what's for what. Wouldn't it be horrible for some of those agents in the world that are going to write in a closing cost credit thinking that that's their commission, and then they get to the closing table and they can't take that money for commission legally? Okay, our listings, we're doing good. 335. My favorite document. Listing agreement. Let me make sure I don't miss anything. Paragraph authorized broker. Okay, yeah. Okay, all right. So listing agreement wise, we're getting into the good stuff. I want to go over this with you one more time because I know you know, but I'm going to say it just because. This box here, 4C, additional compensation to me, your listing agent, if a buyer is unrepresented. Okay. As a reminder, that's not a dual agency box. Okay. That's a box that if we go into contract with somebody that doesn't have an agent, that isn't represented at all, they're self-represented, you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, are going to pay me this much more money for dealing with them. Okay? For dealing with them. My default for that box is 2. Okay, because it doesn't sound as scary, although I'm thinking about going up. Alan executed one the other day at 2.5. You can put 3, you could put 1, you could put whatever you're comfortable with, as long as you know that, hey, you know what? Doing a transaction and dealing with a buyer that's unrepresented is probably harder than dual agency. Okay. So you need to get paid. Even though you're not legally bound to that person and you bear no quote unquote risk for representing that person if something doesn't go well, you still have to deal with the headache portion of it. And the headache portion of it is significant. Okay. It's significant. Let me make sure I didn't miss my other box. All right. I'm going to go slow because I don't know where the box is. Okay, right here. This one I've been struggling with a little bit, you guys. E2 number 10. Publication of seller willingness to consider concessions, aka commissions. All right. Basically, if this is checked, the seller is authorizing you to market that the seller is willing to consider requested concessions for the purpose of commission. And then there's 2 boxes underneath. The first one is in the MLS listed above if it's permitted by the MLS. It's not. Okay? It's not. So just don't even check that box because it's not. It is not permitted by the MLS. And my first default was, and I'm not going to check it in the second box. Okay, but then I thought about it. In any other marketing outside of the MLS, okay? And what I realized is this. Steve is an agent and he texts me. And he says, hey, are you guys going to pay a commission on the sale to the buyer's broker? And I say, hey, thanks for showing the property. The seller will look at anything. Submit it with your offer. Technically, that's marketing outside of the MLS. It's coming out of my mouth. It's not on a piece of paper. It's not printed on a piece of paper, but technically, that's marketing the property outside of the MLS. If I'm going to do that, if I'm going to have those conversations, I need that box checked. Okay. Technically and legally, if I don't check that box and Steve asked me that question, I can't answer him. Right? I can't answer him. I can just say, I don't know. I don't know. Or I can say, no. I don't want to say either of those. Right? So moving forward, if you're going to execute a listing and you know that you're going to have those conversations, because you're going to have them verbally, you're going to have them via text, you're going to have them via email. Okay. You know that you're going to have those conversations. So get that box checked. That doesn't change my position on what we've talked about in the past, which is don't be putting on social media that the seller is willing to offer concessions. Don't be putting it on other websites that the seller is willing to offer concessions. Don't be saying it's not smart to say to a buyer's agent verbally via text or via email, oh, hell yeah. Just submit it. You get 2.5, no brainer. That's not smart. All right. Our conversation and our approach is not going to change, which is, hey, thank you for showing my property. Thank you for thinking about writing an offer. The seller is open to looking at all requests. Please just submit what you're thinking about on your RPA, and I will submit it for discussion. End of story. Right? End of story. Anything else is going to cause you problems or get you in trouble. I promise you. I absolutely promise you it will. Okay. It's gotten to the point, and it's been a minute, but it's gotten to the point where I put my listings on social media, I get a little comment that says, are there a cooperating commission? I just delete the whole damn comment, like delete. It's gone. I don't even want it there, right? Not going to answer it, not going to acknowledge it. I'm just going to delete it. And eventually, if they're that interested, they're going to text me or call me anyways, right? They're going to do it. So don't worry about that. All right. Also in the listing agreement now, auto populates whenever you click RLA, you get the form that you need attached to it automatically, which is the new MLSA. Okay. Those of you that done a lot of listings, you'll recall an SELM. You remember that form? That form's gone. Okay. So the new addendum to any listing is an MLSA. It talks about the MLS, what it is, what you can do, what you can't do. But here's the important part so that you don't get fined by MetroList. Okay. Scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. Oh, did I miss it? Did I miss it? I did. I'm in the advisories. Hold on. Let me go back. Sorry. Scrolled too fast. Sorry, guys. I'm getting used to the new form too. Here it is. See this one right here? D. I don't know. Yeah, it's just D. D item 2. For every listing that you execute, I guarantee it, because you guys are going to do a great job on the listing and you need time to prep it after you've had a listing agreement signed. You got to have this box checked, A. Okay, you got to have it checked. And you got to put in the date that you believe that you're going to go on market, right? So today's the 9th. I signed a listing agreement today. I say, look, I need 3 weeks to get your house ready to go. 9 plus 21 is 30. My day on market is 130. I'm going to put 130.25 in right there. Okay. And the reason that you need that is because MetroList rules say that any listing that we sign has to be available and publicized on the MLS. Is it 3 days or 1 day? I don't know. It's really, really short, right? What is it, Steve? 3? Okay. Yeah. The rule says Steve knows because he gets the fine too, right? So you have to have if you sign the listing agreement within 3 days, you have to have it on MetroList. It's just not possible, you guys, if you're doing it right. It's just not possible. So if we assign a date in here and we have that box checked and then we have the listing agreement signed, we're out of jail. Okay, we're out of jail. Doesn't mean that MetroList isn't going to like send you an email and say, hey, you're in violation. Here's our rule, blah, 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 blah. And you go, yep, I know. Here's the listing agreement. There's the date. We're good. And they go away, right? They go away. So make sure that you execute that with any of your listing agreements and that you fill that box in. All right. That was a lot of fun. I know. Questions, comments, thoughts, concerns. It's here. 2025. Rock and roll. All right. Rock and roll. The greatest comeback in residential real estate. Here we go. It's going to be awesome. There is more activity. We already talked about the rate thing. I'm really, really charged up about that. I just, assuming that we don't get involved in some kind of worldwide military conflict, I really think everything is going to be much, much better in 2025. So there's Cindy. Yeah. Hi, Cindy. Hi, Cindy. Hey, y'all. How y'all doing? Anybody got anything to add or anything they want to talk about before we get out of here and go watch Notre Dame?
How do I unmute? Oh, am I unmuted now?
You are?
Oh, cool.
Yeah. It's neat how it works.
Yeah. Well, I have to go back and review those forms, and maybe it's something we should talk about after, but like Ursula's,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I just keep extending it out
Yeah.
when their construction day is going to be done, probably February,
Yeah.
middle of February, something like that.
I think your last form was on the new RLA though, so we'll be all right. But you probably have to do some kind of modification to the on-market date because they're not going fast enough. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'll look at what I have now and make sure I'm covered on that
Okay.
and then um redo it. Okay. And I'll have to review some of those forms. So
When's it going to be done, do you think? This is a
um
loaded question for everybody else here because that's going to be the granddaddy of open houses, man. That thing is big
I
and
know.
nice in a gated community with a swimming pool on a cul-de-sac. Like that's a
Yeah.
farming, you know what? Yeah.
Well, I met with the project manager and the designer today. They brought the samples of the floor and the color of the cabinets, which are the dark gray. I think it'll look okay. Stairway's going to be dark gray. And they got the tile floor sample, big, huge floor sample we took into the tile place today to pick out countertops.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're looking at like February 19th is what construction time. They're doing the mudding tomorrow on the walls.
Yeah.
And then they have a lot of prep to do on the floors, all the
Yeah.
floors, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
probably, oh, here comes my granddaughter. Hi, baby.
Yeah.
Um,
Into
you
February,
got to come up
beginning of
here and see her.
March.
She's so cute. Year and a half. Um, no, I'm Gigi. So probably like I'm thinking March,
Yeah. Beginning of March. Okay.
beginning of March. Yeah. So it'll be soon. And then I'm gonna have them touch up the paint on the outside. We were looking at the trim today with the color I already have. We're gonna do that.
West
You can
Rockland
open the
guys,
door.
uh,
Oh, help with the
get,
book. Okay.
get with Cindy and set up, put your name in the hat. West Rockland, great house, completely redone, cul-de-sac. It's gonna be a hell of an open house. It's gonna be a hell of a farm. Hell of a farm.
Yeah, it'd be great to market in that neighborhood, you know.
Yeah.
So I think you know, even though the colors I didn't really like a whole bunch. Sorry guys. Let Papa read you a book and I'll be right there. Okay. Um, I think it'll be okay, you know, once it's all done. I wish it wasn't tile floor, but
Yeah.
it is what it is. So
It's groutless. It'll be cool. It's groutless. Yeah.
yeah, so it's going to be a great one. I mean, my plan for this is to be out here getting the stager lined up and all that for a week, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
the open house, I'll launch it. Somebody can do it with me, whoever wants to do it with me. And then from that point forward, I'm not going to come back and forth to do open houses.
You could put two or three people in that house
I know
and do just fine. That thing is big. I
it
mean,
is. It's 48, 52 square
yeah,
feet, something like that.
yeah, yeah. And you could have
Um,
somebody out back making sure that nobody went swimming in the pool. I mean, like,
I know
yeah,
it's going to be a good timing with it. I think the weather will should be nice, you know. Um, yeah, it should be good. So
tell them what you
see
and your
what
dad
we.
what? Oh, Jensen clan will be there at the open house. Team Jensen. Yeah,
Oh, Team Jensen.
Team
Yeah, way to
Jensen.
rock it,
Yeah.
man. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, if you don't get it sold, at least you'll have probably an appearance in the police blotter. So that's
Yeah,
good.
right.
It's always good. Yeah,
I know.
yeah,
You mentioned something about rates.
yeah,
What's happening there? They're really high. They're 7.5%.
yeah.
Mm.
They're stupid right now, but they're absolutely going to go down. And but the problem is, or not the problem, but the issue is that they might not go down to the extent that lots of people are hoping for. The best forecasts, and they're all consistent from really, really smart people and really, really smart data farms, is it's 6.5 for the whole year. That's what you're going to get. So, um, I think that 6.5 is the number. And when we're talking to clients, and when they start asking about rates or making statements about rates or whatever, just go ahead and spit that number out and spit it out with a high level of confidence. That's what it's going to be. Buyers need to plan their life at 6.5. That's what it is.
Yeah, because you can't even to buy that rate down. you know,
Well, no, you could,
like
no,
a point and a half is like 40
that's,
grand.
that's Class A paper, you know, you could certainly buy it down, but it's going to be, we know it's kind of expensive
Yeah,
to do that.
really expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
Okay.
20% down, guys. That's A paper, 20% down, 80%. So, you know, FHA, VA, Brendan, you might have a little better feel of this. If the a conventional 20 is 6.5, is FHA 6.75? What is it?
675, FHA is typically a little bit lower than conventional.
Oh, okay.
I believe it's been a minute. I did get a lender update today and they're at 6.99 at par today. And the 15-year is 5.99. So
Gotcha.
I think you're right. I think 6.5 is where we'll hover at.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, it's a little bit murky today is what I'm being told, and 6.99 is where we're at currently.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I typically I believe you get a lower rate for FHA, but you pay more for it because you're paying MI.
Right. Right. Okay. Makes sense. All right. Anybody else? No? All right. Well, it's good to see you. It's good to be back in business. You know, let's go out and just kick a ton of tail in 2025. If you need me, please reach out. I've been super pumped up for the past couple of weeks to talk to a bunch of you about transactional stuff and stuff that's going on. That really has got me fired up moving into 2025. So, other than that, I'm going to click the button. I will just say before I say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go Irish. See you later.